Why are stories important, and how does that fit into this whole concept of leadership training?
Oh, I love that. Let's talk about it. Storytelling in the workplace sounds like if I'm going to run a meeting, instead of being like, here's the 15 agenda items and let's just charge forth, can I start the meeting with even a 30-second story that's somehow relevant to something we're going to talk about? So essentially, how can we start with this idea that we can inspire, we can show other folks how we haven't done it well through our own stories, and then help them to be successful? And if we break it all down, that is what we want to do at work. If we want to influence and connect, then we can inspire through storytelling.
Who's this Julie Lancaster? Never heard of her. She's wrote a book. She's here to talk about leadership. What makes you the authority on leadership?
Being a person who was just thrown in to leadership, I know what it's like to have to try and stumble through. I have the School of Hard Knocks experience myself. My company, Lancaster Leadership, we've had the opportunity to help organizations just like that and to gain three things: leadership skills, to increase their workplace culture, and also
Well, hello and welcome to another guest interview here on the Profit with Love podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and I'm super stoked for the conversation today because we have done over 500 episodes and we have talked about literally everything when it comes to business. We've talked about marketing, we've talked about sales, we've talked about team development, we've talked about financials, we've talked about KPIs, performance compensation, you name it, we've talked about it here on the podcast. There's one area that we're really lacking in. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about it. And I feel like this is a hidden risk almost like the problem you don't know you have until you're in it. And then even then, you don't even know what it is. It's kind of like going to the doctor with some sort of symptoms and you're like, I know something's bothering me, but you can't put your finger on it. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. So I'm excited to jump into this and lay this out for you with our guest. Our guest is Julie Lancaster. Julie is the president of Lancaster Leadership, where she and her team coach and train thousands of professionals each year with decades of leadership experience and a background in education and coaching. She's known for helping leaders navigate change with clarity and confidence. She's also the author of Beyond Words and co-author of Triumphs of Transformation. Beyond Words is a new release, came out the end of last year, and I just checked it out. Looks really interesting, and I already just purchased it on Amazon. We'll link that up for you in the show notes. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun to dive into that. Before we jump in, real quick, if this conversation we're about to have, where we're going to jump into talking about leadership, is something that hits a nerve, it's for you. Like, this is something you're experiencing. What I want to invite you to do is I want to invite you to reach out to us because you're probably a perfect fit for our fractional CFO services. Our fractional CFO services are used to help our clients transition from flying by the seat of their pants, growing by just what's thrown at them, to diving into the numbers, understanding what is making your firm grow. What are the things that you need to focus on in order to leverage up? And when you work with us, it's not just focusing on the numbers, but it's bringing an entire conversation to you in helping your leadership team to understand the direction that they're going to go. And if you don't have a leadership team, to help you develop that, which is why I'm so excited about the conversation we're about to have. So, Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Let's talk about leadership. Before we do, people are going to want to know, who's this Julie Lancaster? Never heard of her. She's wrote a book. She's here to talk about leadership. What makes you the authority on leadership? How did you end up stepping into this? Give us a little bit of your backstory.
Well, thanks, Moshe. I would love to. Okay, so being a person who was just thrown in to leadership, they're like, here's your computer, here are your keys. Let me know if you have any questions. I know what it's like to have to try and stumble through and scramble through figuring out how to do it well. When I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I then went, after I graduated from college, to be a rock climbing instructor. After that, spent time in Africa doing Peace Corps stuff decades and decades ago. Then I came back and I ran an outdoor education school. Then after that, I somehow managed to find my way as the Dean of Education. of a small college. After promotions and promotions, I was in this role. And my job was to train faculty, to coach faculty, to help them be fantastic instructors, but also have this really excellent team. And I was scrappy. I was figuring it out along the way. So I had the School of Hard Knocks experience myself. And then for the last 14 years, my company, Lancaster Leadership, we're based in Arizona, but we serve nationally and also globally. We have had the opportunity to help organizations just like that to be intentional and to gain three things: to gain leadership skills, to increase their workplace culture, and also have future-focused strategy so they're not just scrappy and figuring it out. So we've been in lots of rooms and we've seen what works and what doesn't. And probably personally, the thing that taught me the most is I've had a chance to get ready, hold your breath for this. I have written 900 performance evaluations for employees, students, people. And so I have seen what is successful and what is not successful. So I feel like I can also take that into what I'm able to help folks with. How's that sound?
Yeah. I love numbers, but I can't imagine doing performance evals. So 900 performance evals just sounds like torture to me.
Yeah.
But that being said, we can totally dive into that. What honestly, I love your story. I think not only is it a great journey, but it really gives you the tools necessary to have this conversation. And you don't need my anointment of that, but I think it really helps our listeners to understand, the frame of reference that you're coming from.
Yeah.
So one of the things that happens in my world, where we enter into a business that is in what either desired rapid growth or actual rapid growth, right?
Yes.
It's one or the other, right?
Right.
So we're either helping them to do it or they're already in the process of this happening. And what I've found in working with these types of clients is the business was built from the ground up. So the owner was typically the operator on day one. And they're an attorney. They opened a firm because, hey, I'm an attorney. I can serve clients on my own. I could probably bring in more money than I could bring in working for somebody else, or I don't need to answer to somebody, whatever their motivation was.
Right.
And they start doing the work themselves, which is the first mistake. But that being said, they then start to add support staff around them. So they're adding these roles that are not to put the roles down, but they're bottom level roles, right? They're
Sure.
not overseeing anything; they're doing the actual work. And then they add to that. So they add another attorney, they add more support staff, and we're constantly adding these doing positions.
Yeah.
And not the people who are going to oversee that, who are going to be responsible for that happening. And what ends up happening is that we never recognize that we need to bring a leader in,
Yeah.
but we do recognize we need somebody to manage the process. So we elevate from within. We bring somebody up, and we anoint them a leader, but we don't give them training to lead. We don't give them training to manage.
Yeah.
So that's been my experience from the outside in, is like, this is a big hole for my clients, in that there isn't somebody out there talking about, hey, here's the step by step of how to add a layer of management into your business, and here's how to up level them, bring their skill set up. So let's start there. Let's start talking about the business owner who finally has leadership roles they're filling. And there's a lot of different places we can go. The first place I'd like to start is like, elevate from within or hire from outside. What are your thoughts there? What should somebody be thinking about?
That's a really important question, and there's two components to this. So one, to share with you, one time I was working with someone who's a manager, high level, and he had 60 direct reports, which I never even understood how that worked. I was like, aren't there tiered levels? He said, no, they all report to me. And I said, okay, let's talk succession planning for a moment. So that's what, Moshe, you and I are talking about, is succession planning for a role. When a role becomes available or necessary, do we have somebody on the bench who would be ready to fill it? And he at the time said, no, I don't have anybody. None of them have the leadership competencies that I need. And from there, we were able to have a really honest and important conversation because you and I know it's not that there was anything wrong with those folks. Like, it's not that they would be terrible leaders, but there hadn't been a trajectory, a plan to help to develop their skills while they were in a lower, let's say, level role so that they could be somewhat ready to fill shoes one day when he moved on or that kind of thing. So that's the real question. You hire from within if you have been being proactive, and so that somebody might be a good fit. Now, it could be a good fit because they have some actual technical competence. They know how to do that job. Or it could be a good fit because you're like, that personality, they are a go-getter and they know how to learn stuff. But isn't it amazing if there's a little bit of both of that? The beauty of hiring externally is you can have somebody who's already competent in that particular skill set, and it's not from the ground up kind of learning. You got to have some people that have some level of competence and aren't all just scrappy and figuring it out. So if you're hiring from within and you don't have folks that are already skilled and tooled up, you can hire consultants, you can hire support so that the learning trajectory can be practically vertical. But we all know, wouldn't it be lovely? Like, it would be ideal if we could always only just hire from within, because there's great retention, there's great morale. Typically, it shows that we grow our own, but there has to be a learning component somewhere where it's not just insular. And so people are knowing what's going on out there beyond their own firm.
Yeah, it's very interesting because on top of the positives of uploading somebody from within, there's also the negatives of bringing in somebody from the outside. Like the people who are in your organization and look at this outsider that came in and kind of skipped their way to the top, so to speak, right?
Right.
And didn't have to go through it with them. Maybe they don't even understand us. They don't understand our culture. They don't understand our product. At least that's the way the employees see it. Obviously, we know that bring somebody in who knows their stuff, they're gonna pick that up very quickly, right? Like they're gonna be inserted into the business fairly rapidly. But there definitely is power to not creating that kind of ruffling of the feathers in amongst the ranks of the people who are in your organization.
Yeah.
So understanding that humans are, I mean, I guess we're children at at heart, right? Like that's really the way we think about it is, like we have to worry about their emotions,
Yes,
we
we do.
so you said something very interesting,
Yeah.
and I really want to dive into that. So you said that you can have somebody on the bench, you can have somebody who you're kind of grooming them for the role. It's almost like if you think about it from a high level of succession planning,
For
you
sure.
would groom your next CEO. Like, I mean, the
Yes.
most visible one that we've watched happen over the last 20 years is Warren Buffett, right?
Uh,
And I mean, he just officially handed the baton over to the next CEO last year, right? And this, as a matter of fact, not even last year, like last quarter. And this past weekend or 2 weekends ago, it was recently, they had their first investor meeting where the new CEO was now running the meeting. But he groomed, I think it's Mick Abel, right? He groomed Mick Abel for that role for years
yeah.
before saying, okay, I'm ready for this person to now step into that role.
Pretty
And I
smart.
think the missing component
For sure.
for any of our listeners is not even knowing or having the visibility that I actually need to be prepping somebody for that next role,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Because
So
there's everything that's on fire in front of us. We're like, here's my to-do list. There's 200 things like mentoring, coaching, the leadership of the next generation. That might be the case and that might not be the case often just falls to the wayside because there's too many other things to do.
yeah, I think that there's two parts to this problem. I think part number one, you're right. They don't, well, there's three parts actually, because your part is new. Your to me,
Yeah. Yeah.
your part is the logistical piece, right? But that's assuming that the owner or somebody on their team is the person who's going to groom that person for the role. But in reality, most owners are not great leaders, or they didn't go through any
Yeah.
formal training themselves, so they've
Right.
arrived at great leadership on their own, but not really understanding or knowing how they did it. It's almost like you get a salesperson who grows through the ranks,
Right.
and they're now closing at 40%, and you tell
Right.
them, go teach these other salespeople how to close at
Uh,
40%, and
yep.
they don't know how to teach them because they don't know how they did it themselves.
Yeah.
So problem number one is there is no talk about this. So like people don't even realize I need to groom somebody for this. I need to prepare for the possibility of this.
Yeah.
So that's problem number one, but we're solving that right now. We're talking about it on the podcast. And if you're
Right.
listening to the Profit with Law podcast, you now know, right? Problem number two is, who does the training? Is it the owner, or do I bring in an outsider to train
Right.
the next person? And if it's the owner, how do we find the time for it? If it's an outside
Yes.
person, who do we go to? How do we even start to
Right.
find the solution for this?
Yes.
Like, this is not the thing that people are bombarding you with, right? All the marketing agencies are bombarding you with about working with them, but
Right.
it's not like we're getting knocks on the door saying, "Hey, I've got my leadership training for you."
Right. Well, I love that you can identify that because, right, even if someone is hungry, they're like, where do I get fed? And no, 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 it should not be the managing partner or the founder who is doing all of the training, but they are the visionary and they have to be the strategist. And if anyone's listening to this and they're like, I should be doing that, but I'm not, you can start from day one. You can start today being like, okay, so if, right? We're just talking about if one day I left, if one day this position was open, if one day we 10x'd our revenue. I don't know what might be possible. We can start with not knowing the end game. But also, what is so important is figuring out what's the skill gap. Before we even figure out what's the training that's needed, what's the gap? So we either go directly to the person who we might call a hypo, right? A high performer that we're like, maybe one day, it's not being promised, but one day they might be a good fit, and find out what are your strengths that currently allow you to be successful currently at work, and what are your growth areas that if you were better would help you to be more successful currently in this role. And then the person who's in the highest positional leadership role needs to figure out that same thing and then needs to do a skills assessment. What are the skills needed for this one level of leadership? What are the skills needed for the other? And from there can start to be a conversation to see where's the gap, because nobody needs to be taught stuff they already know. So in my very humble opinion, it really needs to be tailored leadership competence development. So there are two paths. So one, once it's clear, I mean, you could find assessments anywhere. We have one called the Authentic Leader Assessment. And we have someone take that and they're like, oh, here are my strengths that are helpful at work. Oh, here are my growth areas. And then for the technical stuff, it's not even all that hard for people to figure out. They can do a time study for 3 days and be like, how do I actually spend my time at work? And then they can show somebody else that to say, these are the technical competencies. But taking an assessment, then figuring out what to learn. Can the visionary, the founder, the owner, whomever, the managing partner, discover what a potential training plan could look like? Like, for example, to say, I think within 6 months, this person could learn starting with this, next this. So there's at least a blueprint. From there, now we're at like part G, which is now how do they learn that? So sure, maybe there's internal training about some of that where there's once a week, sit down, 20 minutes of mentorship on here's how to do the books. Here's how to run a good meeting. I don't know. But then there for sure is some sort of external partner who's got the time capacity. I sometimes think of leadership coaches like myself. Sometimes people will call us workplace therapists. So we're not trained in therapy, but it's for sure this idea of like, okay, I got to get better at running meetings. All right, let's work on it. I got to get better at motivating others. Let's work on it. I got to get better at prioritizing. Let's work on it. So there's help. There is so much help, but you got to get clear first on what you need help on.
Now, I mean, you just alluded to the fact that you're a leadership coach, and this is the kind of work that you do. what's interesting is I think your area of expertise is doing that training or that coaching through stories. Can you tell me more about that? Why are stories important, and how does that fit into this whole concept of leadership training?
That. Well, storytelling, it's interesting. 2026 is the year of leadership storytelling. It used to just be like, I don't know, sitting around the fire, or old yarns, families telling stories to each other. I don't know. But now what we know is it's one of our greatest influence tools possible. So if we want to influence and connect, and if we break it all down, that is what we want to do at work. If we want to influence and connect, then we can inspire through storytelling. And when we're talking about storytelling, I don't mean like once upon a time stories. It's like me sharing when I got my first job and I was trying to be so professional. And I had my first office job and I picked up the phone and I was trying to dial somebody who was like on the list that looked like I was supposed to call. I couldn't figure out how to dial out. I kept dialing, and after 4 numbers, the maintenance director, he kept answering. And I was like, Stuart, why are you answering? And why can't I call? He's like, don't you know, you have to first dial 9. Like, I was never taught that. I was never trained on that. So essentially, how can we start with this idea that we have to, we can inspire, we can show other folks how we haven't done it well through our own stories, and then help them to be successful. Nobody wants to walk into a team of folks where we think they're all perfect, because then if I think you're all perfect, I'm not going to be vulnerable. I'm not going to ask questions. I'm going to act like I know stuff. And that is death of any organization, where people aren't willing to be vulnerable and say what they know and what they don't know, what they're competent at, where they need help. And so storytelling in the workplace sounds like, if I'm going to run a meeting and I have a weekly or a monthly meeting, instead of being like, here's the 15 agenda items and let's just charge forth, can I start the meeting with even a 30-second story that's somehow relevant to something we're going to talk about? Because what we know is that if we are listening to a meeting, if we're part of a meeting or listening to a presentation, we flatline. Our brains are bored. But the moment someone starts telling a story, to your talk, when you said, oh, I guess people have emotions that we have to deal with or something like that, it appeals to the feeling part of the brain, emotions, and what we feel, we remember. What we feel, we're inspired to take action on. So that's where storytelling kind of plays into it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's very very interesting, and I'm still focused on your story of dialing 9, because I was in a business where they had a really poor SOP. You were in a situation where they didn't teach you to dial 9. Well, I was in a place where they told you in order to dial out, you got to dial 9-1. But they didn't tell me that the 1 was the one from before the area code. So I was trying to dial out, and I dialed 9-1 and then 1 and the area code, and I kept getting the emergency services. I they're like, is there an emergency there? Like, no, I'm just trying to make a phone call. So, yeah,
You see,
it goes both ways, right?
exactly what you're doing. I share this little random story. I don't know where it's going to land for you. And then you're like, hey, that connects to me. So we are developing this relationship. We learn through stories. And I swear, if you and I ran into each other, 5 years from now, and we were like, what do we remember about that recording? We'd be like dialing 9. That's all.
Yeah,
No, I mean,
you know
other
what?
things too, but yeah.
It's so true, because we remember the weirdest details. I have a coach in our coaching program. She's a marketing coach, and she's a CMO for a 9-office PI firm in Virginia. Her name is Cassidy Lewis. So Cassidy and I met at Craig Goldenfarb is an attorney down in Florida who runs once a year. He does a 7-figure mastermind for a day.
Okay.
And he did it in New York City. And I was like, I'm in New York. I'm just going to, like, why shouldn't I go to this thing? So I purchased a ticket. I went, and they had a cocktail reception that night. and I met this woman, and she was quite dynamic, and we were talking for like, I don't know, a half hour, 45 minutes, and long conversation, all about different things, industry. But somewhere in there, she talked about her husband and how he worked for the city of Newport or whatever it was, right? So like, I got the city wrong. It's one of these cities in Virginia, Norfolk,
Oh
the
yeah.
city of Norfolk, and I forget about the conversation. I forget about her. 6 months later, she's a podcast guest. I'm recording this conversation with her, and I don't remember that we met. She doesn't either.
Oh
So
no.
we're like halfway into this interview, and she mentions something about her husband who
Stop
works
it.
for the city of Norfolk, and I'm like, wait a second, were you at the seven-figure event? She's like, yeah. I'm like, we talked on the rooftop, and instantly reconnected. So to your point, like, stories have that level of power where it's like, I didn't remember that I had ever met her before.
Wow.
And we're halfway through this interview, and nothing clicked, but that story brought it all together.
I love that so much, because here's what I hear, and this is for your listeners too, is that if you are overworked, burnt out, exhausted, one of the first things to go is going to be curiosity. Right? Like, we're just like, I got to just take care of myself. I'm not curious. But by the very fact that at first you were curious, right? You were having this conversation with a stranger. And then second, in the moment, you were like, hold on. And you like leaned into the curiosity. What a magical moment that was created. So I think first, that's a good place for people to assess, how's my curiosity these days? And then secondly, when we are sharing stories, I want to be clear, I mean a particular way of sharing stories, then it's kind of like a treasure hunt, right? I might be like, Norfolk, oh my gosh, my mom is from Norfolk, or whatever, right? We're seeing all these connection points. But Moshe, I'm curious if this is how you grew up too. But I grew up hating stories because I was held hostage. Maybe it's because I'm a good listener, just blessing and a curse, I suppose. But I was held hostage and by long-winded storytellers who would be talking about nothing that I cared about. And I thought, like, stories are terrible. Until I learned you can just use, we've developed this thing called the REST method. It's REST, like real simple things that make people not want to like walk the entire way around the other, corner, so they don't have to walk by you because they're going to be stuck and trapped. One of the strategies is make them short.
Yes. I love that. I don't relate to hating stories growing up, but I do relate to it now because, and I don't think she listens to the podcast, so I could talk about my mother-in-law, but I love my mother-in-law, but when she wants to tell me a detail, it is precluded with the entire backstory, starting from when somebody was born, of how this came to be, and it's just like how they ended up at this place for lunch, and it's like, and I get all this detail that's completely unnecessary, and it makes me like, I just don't want, like, when she starts talking and she starts launching into a story, I'm like, can you just tell me the point first? And then we can talk about whether the story's needed. So I totally get it.
As you're sharing that, I'm over here like getting the cold sweats because I got a lot of trauma from long-winded, like irrelevant, pointless listening.
All right, so let's bring this home because we're just about out of time. So clearly there's a ton of power in stories. You have a methodology around it. Why don't we wrap up with this? Why don't you share with our listeners one parting piece of advice or wisdom, but then how can they learn more about this? How can they learn more about the REST method and other ways that stories can help with leadership? And maybe if they want to learn more about you, what are some steps that they could take to do that?
Oh, perfect. So the first thing I want everyone to understand is you do not need to go out and read a book about how to tell a story. You don't have time for that. Okay, maybe 1 in 1,000 folks do. But what you need to do is first get scrappy, because you already know how to get scrappy, right? If you're building a business, if you're a learner, you've had to be scrappy along the way. So the thing is the next meeting you're about to have, whether it's social or professional, think about what's a story I could tell that's 3 minutes or less that has a point. So if I'm going to go talk with someone and work with them about how to be a better delegator, about how to hold somebody accountable, how to increase motivation during the messy middle, whatever, I'm going to stop and think about for myself, when have I experienced that? That's it. And so if you want to learn more about how to deliver short and interesting and inspiring and connecting stories, you could look to our book, right? To my book, Beyond Words, How Our Stories and Strategies Inspire Leadership Action. What I like about it is also there are 31 leadership strategies in there coupled with stories. So to that point, if you're like, I want to know how to delegate, how do I delegate and trust people and get quality results? And at the same time, hear a story that would spark them, maybe one of your own stories. That's how to do it. If you want to reach out, if you want help with any of this stuff, the best way is probably to go to our website, which is lancasterleadership.com. There's no D, Lancaster. And there we can help you out with, we could get you an authentic leader assessment. We can get you an organizational actions assessment for you to assess what are the things we're actually supposed to be doing to have positive, sustainable systems instead of just putting Band-Aids on things and putting out fires. We can also teach you about different programming like leadership academies, strategic planning, one-on-one coaching. There is help and support for you out there.
Awesome, Julie. Thank you so much for sharing. Even though we're out of time, I'll share one last story. So I've been using this story in our 2-day workshop that we do. So we host a 2-day workshop. It's called the 100K per month workshop, and 100K per month revenue or profit, whichever you're trying to achieve. And in that workshop, we help law firm owners to basically get really clear about their vision, create an action plan, and leave knowing how they're going to make that happen. So by the way, just as an aside, if you want to know more about that, go to profitwithlaw.com/LFG 2026. That is law firm growth, or let's F and go, right? 2026. But that's not the purpose of the story. So I'm also a paramedic. Many of our listeners know that. You didn't. You just found that out. I was a fairly new paramedic. I get dispatched to a woman in labor. On the way, I get updated. The woman has delivered a baby. We walked in, and there's a volunteer EMT had gone straight to the house, and he is holding this just born tiny child. I have never seen a baby that small. This baby was 20 weeks gestation, so about halfway through the pregnancy. This baby was 2 pounds 2 ounces, and he is doing mouth to mouth on this baby. Now, I do not recommend that. We don't do mouth to mouth on a baby. That is disgusting. But he was doing it anyway. I take the baby from him. We clamp the cord, cut the cord, and I wrap the baby up. I make sure that mom is okay. I leave the EMT with mom. Hospital's 5 minutes away. I can't wait for this baby, and I can't wait to have 2 patients. I run into the ambulance with the baby. We start resuscitating the baby with some a BVM, like blowing air into the baby and warming the baby with aggressive resuscitation. We were able to basically get the baby to be crying by the time we walk into the hospital. Fast forward a number of years later, and I went back to the house for the mom, gave her some IV fluids, brought her to the hospital as well. A few years later, I walk into the ER, and the nurse says, "Hey, by the way, your kid was here." And I'm like, "My kid? I don't even live here. Like, why would my kid be?" And she's like, "No, not your kid, but like, you remember that baby you brought in? Well, he was just here. He's the cutest thing in the world. He was here for a cough and a cold or whatever." So the moral of that story, when I tell it, is, hey, in that moment, I was dealing with a life and death situation. Failure wasn't an option, right? I had to succeed. Like, that was the only outcome that was possible. What if you approach that with your business every day? What if failure wasn't an option? What if your only option is to succeed? So I'll leave everybody with that, folks. If you're not if you're not subscribed to this show, you want to make sure to hit that subscribe button, because we cover some really cool stuff on here. But this was a great conversation, Julie. Appreciate you being here. We are here every single Thursday with a new episode. We'll catch you next time. Take care. Bye for now.